ACOs, latest fad or long-awaited fix. Tonight on this special edition of 15 Minutes. Good evening, I'm Nick Weil, and you're watching 15 Minutes. Accountable care organizations have taken the healthcare world by storm, but many ask, are they for real? Tonight on this special edition of 15 Minutes, we'll explore these enigmatic new entities, where they came from, where they are now, and where they might take us in the future. The term accountable care organization was first coined in 2006 by Dartmouth Institute's Director of Health Policy, speaking before a Medicare Payment Advisory Committee. The term and the concept have since caught like wildfire, reaching a peak in 2009 with their inclusion in the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. But before we discuss health care reform's sponsorship and adoption of ACOs, we should ask ourselves, what is an ACO? One common definition experts use: an ACO is an entity that will be held accountable for providing comprehensive health services to a population. As many skeptics have pointed out, this definition bears an uncanny resemblance to HMOs, Health Maintenance Organization, which rose to popularity in the 70s, but have largely fallen from grace as a means for controlling costs and addressing population health. Both organizational movements try to shift the healthcare industry's purpose from treating the sick towards keeping patients well. Experts agree there are huge cost savings to be had in this transition, as well as improvements to patient quality of life. Unfortunately, HMOs have yet to see those dreams realized. In 2010, President Barack Obama signed into law the historic Affordable Care Act, often called the greatest change in American healthcare since 1965 and Medicare. The politicians, the pundits, and the public largely focused on the controversial new issues of the insurance exchanges, the individual and employer mandates, and the pre-existing conditions coverage. But tucked away in Title III is a reform with its own lofty aspirations. Section 3022 is entitled the Medicare Shared Savings Program. Under this program, CMS is authorized to contract with willing providers to set up ACOs for Medicare beneficiaries. If certain quality standards and reporting requirements are met, the ACO saves money, then the ACO will be entitled to keep a percentage of those savings. CMS has set up several other ACO demonstrations through its authority under that same title, called the CMS Innovation Center. Also from this innovation program, CMS created the better-known Pioneer ACO model, which closely resembles the Shared Savings ACO. This program is for providers who are already experienced in coordinating care across a population. Like those providers already in ACO partnerships with private insurance companies. Pioneer providers share in a higher percentage of savings than their shared savings program counterparts. But unlike those providers, pioneers risk the losses their organizations incur as well. In effect, CMS levies a penalty against those pioneers who lose money. Here to talk to us more about shared savings, Pioneer, and private ACOs in the market today is industry expert David Mata. Well, welcome to the show, David.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on 15 Minutes.
So tell us a little bit about the marketplace.
Sure, so we can actually start with the Pioneer ACOs, which are the ones, like you mentioned, that are set up by already established hospitals, have more of the resources in play. And the Brookings Institute recently published a study in September of this year looking at the successes and failures of the Pioneers and the Medicare Shared Saving Programs, ACOs. And what they found with the Pioneers is that their cost spending per beneficiary within the ACO increased by about 0.4%. And while that is an increase, when we look at it relative to the spending for their traditional fee-for-service beneficiaries over the same time period, those costs increased by about 1.4%. So there was a cost savings there of approximately 1%. And while we are here to talk about dollars, quality is also a component to the ACO model. And they found that in the Pioneer models, the quality scores increased each year. As a matter of fact, from year 1 to year 2, the overall average scores increased by 15%. Then with the Medicare shared savings programs, what they found was also similarly approximately a 1% savings increased in, or savings rather when you look at the relative spending on the ACO beneficiaries and the fee-for-service beneficiaries. Quality scores for those also kept improving, and what they found was that on the ones that were successful enough to enjoy some of the savings that come along with the program, that the majority of those were physician-led. And not only that, a disproportionate share of those were in Florida and Texas. And one theory as to why that's the case is that with physician-led ACOs, there's less of an administrative burden than, say, if you're a general hospital. You're able to focus more of your resources on follow-ups, helping out your beneficiaries. And as to why Florida and Texas saw so much success, those two states already get a very large share of Medicare spending. And there's some indication that there's already a network in place that the ACOs were able to take advantage of. There's more resources than, say, in other states. But more research is being done into that.
Now, how many providers have volunteered for these ACO models?
So the Medicare Shared Savings Programs is about 220 right now. And the Pioneers actually started at 32, and it's down to 19 now. There's been a few who left.
Can you give us a sense of why these providers left?
Sure, the number one reason given by providers is the financial risk. They simply think it's too great a financial risk for what they're getting out of it. Another problem, so for example, Sharp Healthcare recently quit an ACO, and their reason was the benchmark system. They didn't like that they had no say in how the quality benchmarks and the financial benchmarks were set. They thought the system was just too strict. And another reason cited was what's called patient churn.
One ACO group that we haven't talked about yet is the private market. That is, those providers who, rather than contracting with the government to form an ACO, they have contracted with a private insurance company. Do you have any sense of that market?
Sure, so that's actually a growing market right now. And one example to highlight that would be Aetna, the insurance company. They actually have kind of a consulting wing that goes into providers, tells them how to set up an ACO, what would work best for them. And then they set that up for the Aetna members.
Great stuff, David. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Here at 15 Minutes, we're curious about how ACOs were doing in Illinois. Our chief investigative reporter, Tom Robin, shares his findings. Good to see you again, Tom.
Thanks, Nick.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about how ACOs are doing in the land of Lincoln?
Sure, Nick. Our research has uncovered that there are a wide variety of ACOs already operating in Illinois today. In fact, two of the largest ACOs in the country are right here in Illinois. Advocate is number one with over 550,000 enrollees, and OSF out of Peoria is number 6 with 110,000. Under Medicare, we have 17 ACOs participating in the Shared Savings Program and 1 in the Pioneer Program. In addition to Medicare, the state of Illinois has redesigned its Medicaid program with the development of accountable care entities, also known as ACEs. The state's goal is to have 50% of its Medicaid clientele enrolled in a coordinated care entity by January 1st, 2015. And finally, there are many examples of providers and insurance companies joining to form commercial ACOs. Let's start off with the Medicare ACOs. The 17 shared savings programs include some of the larger health systems based in the state. It also includes health systems based in neighboring states and includes service areas upstate, downstate, on the northern border of the state and in the western counties. ACOs in Illinois also vary by the type of provider leading the organization. A couple of the names that you will recognize from the Chicago area include Alexian Brothers, Advocate, Tenet, Edward Elmhurst, Presence, Ingalls, and Franciscan.
So, Tom, how are these ACOs in Illinois doing?
Shared Savings Program, ACOs most recently reported this past September. And of the 11 Illinois ACOs that reported, 4 saved money, 7 lost money, and in terms of quality, most are improving on their quality metrics. Illinois' lone participant in the Pioneer Program is the large Catholic OSF healthcare system. In 2012, it too improved its quality of care while reducing Medicare costs by 1% and saving $1.86 million. In 2013, however, costs increased and it lost money.
Can you tell us more about this Medicaid ACO program?
Absolutely. One of the more fascinating aspects of accountable care in Illinois is through our Medicaid program's implementation of ACEs. The state of Illinois has over 3 million Medicaid beneficiaries, 1 in 4 residents of the state. The state budget is approximately $15 billion, 22% of the overall state budget. And in 2013, it experienced a $2.7 billion deficit. So it is definitely in need of reform. The Medicare program has been primarily a fee-for-service system for many years. And as a result, in 2011, the state passed a law requiring 50% of Medicaid beneficiaries to be enrolled in a coordinated care system by 2015. What does this program look like as it approaches its January 2015 implementation? Well, initially, 25 providers submitted letters of intent to participate in the program. But after working through the details and all of the requirements of the program, only 9 ACEs ended up enrolling.
Earlier, David and I talked about commercial ACOs. How are the private ACOs looking in Illinois right now?
There are an increasing number of commercial ACOs arriving on the scene in Illinois. There are an incredible amount of deals going down, it seems almost weekly. The large players include OSF Healthcare, Advocate, and Blue Cross Blue Shield. In fact, in August, Blue Cross Blue Shield announced plans to have 16 commercial ACOs in Illinois by 2015. As part of this investigative report, we are taking it to the field to interview Mr. Don Frank, the CEO of Alexian Brothers ACO. That ACO is tied to the 5-hospital Alexian Brothers system that covers approximately 16,000 Medicare beneficiaries.
Great, let's go to the field, Tom.
Nick, we're here today outside Alexian Brothers headquarters in Arlington Heights. Let's go in and talk to CEO Don Frank about their ACO.
Wondering if you could just summarize for us what some of the biggest obstacles and challenges you faced in forming the Alexian Brothers ACO.
I think our initial challenge was to get physicians who have been very successful in the fee-for-service world to come together and recognize that the financing environment for healthcare is changing, that they were going to be held accountable for the cost of care that's being provided to the patients, for the quality of care that's being provided, and for their ability to engage patients in the self-management of their different disease states. So that's, I think, the first issue. The second issue we faced is we've been very successful in the fee-for-service world. So much so that we've realized increases every year in our relationships with payers. And to go from that type of environment to an environment where we're actually trying to keep people out of hospitals. We're actually trying to provide less care. I don't want to say less care, but more appropriate care, which may translate to less care or less revenue coming in. It's a very difficult thing for a hospital system to accept. And so when we set up the ACO, we invited all physicians to come in that were interested, and we view the expense of running the ACO as, in a sense, it's the tuition to learn how to come together and learn how to be clinically integrated. And I think it was recognized on the front end this wasn't going to be inexpensive. We, from an operating perspective, now spend around close to $2 million a year supporting the infrastructure of the ACO. But it's money we think is well spent to educate everybody about the necessities, what they need to do differently in order to be successful and sustainable going forward.
Nick, we'd like to thank Alexian Brothers and Mr. Don Frank for his time today. We leave our interview with the takeaway that regardless of whether or not ACOs last beyond 2016 in their first 3-year trial period, the model, at least on a commercial basis, is here to stay. It's proving successful in the development and improvement of coordinated care, both here in Illinois and nationwide.